This is Phil Kites here, live and direct from Montreal, Quebec. And today, microphone check. I thought I'd do something a bit different. I wanted to reminisce a little bit about Flower. I don't know if you guys saw the standing O, the 10-minute standing O from. I'll try to attach that to the end of the video. But rest in peace, Flower. I'm not sure if people who aren't from the era of Guy Lafleur understand just how big and iconic he was. He's sort of above legend. He was iconic. For me, he was my first hero, along with Ken Dryden, of course. I mean, you can go through the numbers. So 5 Stanley Cups, 4 of which were consecutive. Actually kind of bothered me. Dangle, who I don't mind, I actually like him. He had a podcast with those 3 dudes, and they didn't even know how many consecutive Stanley Cups the Habs won in that era. They said 5 when it was actually 4. It was in the Rocket era where they won. It drove me crazy. They didn't understand basic fundamentals about it. In fact, they even thought that Maurice Richard they're wondering whether Maurice Richard overlapped with Guy Lafleur, even though Richard retired in 60. It's like, how could they not know those basic fundamentals yet be on the radio? Anyways, I would urge people to speak directly to the source when it comes to Guy Lafleur, because he was that big. Let me first go through what he accomplished. So as I said, 5 Stanley Cups, 4 of which were consecutive, a Conn Smythe Trophy winner, 6 consecutive 50-goal seasons, 100-point or more seasons as well, 6 of those. 50-goal consecutive seasons, 6 of them. He lost many prime years, and I think had he played a little bit more, he would have definitely been regarded top 5 all time. I'm bold enough to say that. Along with Howe and Mario, the only person to sort of get inducted to the Hall of Fame and then unretire. So only 2 other people have done that, and they're pretty big names. Holds the Habs' all-time scoring record, won the Art Ross as leading scorer 3 straight years, won the Hart Trophy in consecutive years, NHL MVP, 3-time winner of the Ted Lindsay, which is the Lester B. Pearson or whatever, it's the league MVP as voted by the NHL Players Association, ranked top 10 by almost every single sports writer, notably because of what he achieved during the playoffs. In 3 consecutive years, he won the scoring race, the playoff scoring race, and each of those years he hoisted it. So those are just the numbers, and I can go on and on and on with that, all his records and so on. But Guy Lafleur was unbelievably dynamic, and he was definitely the best player of his era. In other words, from the mid-70s, where he really sort of, until like the late 70s, was really his sweet spot. Of course, Bobby Orr was on decline. I would almost say that he was more exciting than Bobby Orr, or was just as exciting. There's something, his skating was so quick. He was so dynamic. He had one of the hardest shots in the game. He was just so elegant and beautiful to watch, so comparable, I guess, to definitely the 3 best players of the era would have been Bobby Orr, would have been Phil Esposito, and of course, Guy. So the first ever game I saw at the Montreal Forum was probably 78, 79. I'm thinking I was about 7 years old, and my babysitter brought me. So basically it was standing room because she didn't have any money. My parents probably should have paid her more. So and she was not a very bright woman. She was a big hockey fan, but she was a little bit slow. So I actually, even as a 6 or 7-year-old, basically felt like I was the man of the house leading her through the rink. And there we are at the top of the Blues, and I can barely see, and everybody's drunk and beer is splashing, and back then people smoked cigarettes and stuff. And I spied the entire game, and it was my first game. And what happened in that game? It was against the Boston Bruins, and the Montreal Canadiens won 3-1. And they definitely scored a couple of goals in the 3rd period. And the 3 stars of the game I'll never forget were Larry Robinson, who I remember making a headman pass in that game, were Larry Robinson, Ken Dryden, and the first star was Flower. So that's my first game. And who were the coaches? Scotty Bowman and Don Cherry. Now, so that was the most exciting. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the score. What's interesting too, a lot of people talk about the 78, 79 Stanley Cup semifinals as being his greatest goal. It was his greatest goal. It was his greatest goal because of the timeliness of it. I don't think people understand that the Habs, between the second and 3rd period, they were down. They were down like 3-1. They had nothing going on, and they were basically on the brink of elimination. And they came back, and I think they went up. I think Boston got another goal, and they were dead in the water. And what happened, of course, was the famous stick incident, the famous too many men on the ice. And it was so loud in the Forum back in those days, because the seats were wooden and people would bang the seats, that I don't think they heard Cherry on the bench. And two guys jumped over, or 3 guys were about to jump over. So, and he could barely stop them from jumping over. And here we are, the time's running out, the Habs are dead in the water, and there was like a morbidity on the bench with regard to it. And then when that penalty happened, they realized it's their opportunity. What was so strange about it is how deep a headman pass that was, that he knew exactly where the pass back, I think it was Lemaire was on that line. And now everybody talks about the incidents about Lemaire, and later on, when he was coach and all that they had all this strife. Forget about that stuff. And people talk about Flower being a defensive liability. Flower was plus some 400 in his career, plus like 4 something. When you're plus 400, you're not a defensive liability because you're on the ice for so many goals scored. So I just wanted to say that, and that goal was absolutely spectacular because it was the most meaningful one. And of course, the next series, it ended the series. Boston was about to win, and then of course the Habs. I remember the next series where they played against Phil Esposito because he was on the Rangers at that time, and they went through them in 5 games. That's what a dynasty is, and that's why he's so special, because he basically was the premium player. He's probably the greatest player in the greatest franchise in history. Now you can debate, Rocket Richard and Ken Dryden and others, but really in terms of the level of excitement of his era, the speed of it, the elegance of it, it was probably Flower, man. It was probably Flower. And now I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to talk about 50 goals in 6 consecutive seasons. The thing about that, it had never been done. The only players who were able to do that came after Flower. So the first person to do it was Flower, and then Bossy and Gretzky did it. When you talk about OV, I love OV, but OV never did it 6 years in a row to sort of commandeer an era and being the best player of his era. So as great as OV is, he's probably not as good. He's probably similar to Crosby. He's probably not as good as McDavid. We'll see where Matthews pans out and where Leon pan out. But at that time, as good as OV is, and OV is a great goal scorer, he's more comparable to someone like Phil Esposito in terms of his game and toughness and robustness and so on. So it's funny, I can go through some of my memorabilia. This was from his retirement. I was at his retirement at the Montreal Forum, and I still have the painter's cap for it. He was so iconic that in every arena in Quebec, everybody wanted to be Guy Lafleur. Everybody was talking about him. As good as McDavid might be similar in the sense that everybody is talking about him, but almost everybody else, even Sidney Crosby, was not as iconic in the province, because in the province of Quebec, hockey is a religion, and he was the person who ushered in the sense of we can do anything within the province of Quebec, which is perceived as a nation. It has its own people, it has its own land to a certain degree, and only some very technical things keep it from being its own nation. They're not even signatory to the Constitution, so you have to understand what it means to have the flower. Now, I can go through a little bit of what it was like for me at the time. So these are probably from about 1983. Before of course, he retired. He retired and then he came back. And a lot of it had to do with Lemaire, and Serge Savard didn't want to trade him. So you don't want to trade a guy. And he feels like his game isn't where it should be, and he no longer fits in the system and the team. That's how come he ended up retiring. But these are the cards that you would get at the Old Montreal Forum. These would be handed out to you. Or you would purchase these. And this is what we cling to when we listen to radio. The other thing too is in that era, hockey was not on 7 days a week. Hockey was only on Saturdays. The rest of it, you listen to it, and you can imagine the description about his hair and what it was like when he went down on the breakaway. What was also really cool about these cards is I would sit by the Old Montreal Forum and I get autographs on the back. So this is probably Bobby Smith. Some of these might not even be on the right card, but I definitely have autos here. I've met Ludwig. I met all these guys. I definitely met Rick Green. So there's his autograph on the back of it. And so this was, I guess, just before I left, because it was when Lemaire, and he overlapped with Carbonneau, who learned a ton from him. So I'm going to go on to a couple of other things just to talk about a little bit about what Guy Lafleur meant to me. The key thing with Guy Lafleur was he would sign. So I would wait by the Old Montreal Forum. So I don't even know when this is. It probably states it's in the dead of February, the dead of winter. And what was so my dad made me plasticize it, really stupid in hindsight. But so I would get, there's Bob Gainey, I get everybody's autographs. I wait by the side of the forum door. The problem is when you sign with these old Bic pens, the ink wouldn't work, it would freeze up. And Flower would wait diligently with me trying multiple pens, unable to write in the cold because the ink would basically freeze up inside the pen. And then he'd ask someone for another pen, and he would diligently sign for me. I mean, this is as messy as his signature gets. You'll notice that on the cards, his signatures are intact. He learned that from Beliveau. His hero growing up was Beliveau. He wore number 4 growing up. And the pressure he had to replace Beliveau, and that's one of the reasons he tries to sign perfectly. Now, understanding he was holding a loose leaf paper in the cold, grabbing at pens, and he still was able to sign pretty diligently for me. So I mean, when you go back into the history of the game, when you think about who were the best players, everybody obviously will say this guy here, right? You'll say this guy here. People who watch other eras will say perhaps this guy here, right? But I'm telling you right now, in terms of the level of excitement, in terms of what he represented to Quebec and to Canada, I have to say, it's unparalleled. I mean, it's really, really, really unparalleled. Of course, some will say, it's this guy here. That's another possibility. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me here, the 1971 hockey set, the OPG hockey set. I did show it in my top 10 sets video. And of course, there's this guy here, and Howie Morenz. I mean, there's so many players you can consider the best players in the Montreal Canadiens in their history. Vezina would be another one. But for sheer excitement and the weight on him and the amount of teams at the time to have a dynasty, winning 4 cups in a row, and doing it, this is the key thing too, leading the playoffs in points in 3 consecutive years and then hoisting it. It just isn't done anymore. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, again, will say, well, you know, McDavid is better and all the players from this era are obviously better. OV is certainly better, you know, just in terms of the all-time goals record. Now, I personally believe the purest goal scorer of all time was probably Mike Bossy, just in terms of the ease and simplicity and clarity of his game, and he was just an absolute unbelievable sniper. Lafleur too was an incredible sniper. If you watch all of these old videos, all these old images and films and so on, you'll notice that how many go top corner, right in, or go low bottom corner. He had such a specific technical shot. You know, he knew how to beat goalies. So a lot of people are going to compare people like Ovi, Tim, and say, well, there's no comparison. Ovi's a better hockey player. I mean, you can't compare somebody from that. They were so slow, or they're bad skaters and all this stuff. I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. I think the way to look at it is if Ovi played in that era and he were a chain smoker and he didn't have like sensors, now the new high-tech equipment where they can sense what your pressure points are, and then you can work on your muscle mass, and you can train inside swimming pools, and you train all year round. Don't do any of that. Take the same player with his gifts and his will, bring him back in history, and have him play only a couple of months a year, and only have his drive, and not have the sticks that they had, not have the skates that they had, and see how elegant they are, and take them out of that fan base and put them in the Montreal Canadiens fan base, or find a fan base that is similar whereby you can compare the two. That's the point. You can't really compare from era to era. What you can compare is the response and the reception from the fans of that era and what he meant to the state, to the province, to the country. And I think that is the kind of thing that you just will not understand with Flower. So Flower just received another 10-minute ovation. The only time I've ever heard 10-minute ovations, Saku Koivu when he came back from cancer would be one, but was when I saw Flower's retirement, it went on forever. And the only reason the ovation stopped yesterday as of filming this, the only reason it stopped was because of the fact that the PA announcer was like, give us a moment of silence at this point. The fans would go on forever. And Toronto fans don't do that. I'm pretty sure, as much as I love that team in Washington, those fans don't do it. Will they do the same? Do they do the same thing for Gretzky in Edmonton? Do they? Maybe. But I mean, you can count them on one hand right now. You can count them on one hand the amount of fan bases that will do that for which particular player. So that to say that it's one of the reasons that why when I collect almost all of the Habs products. So the Centennial type products I collect. Like this, for example, would be the President's Choice, and it's certainly one of my favorites. I do have, so this is like a bench, this is a seat from the old Montreal Forum that it's autoed. This is Régent Houle, of course, who played with him. I do have the La Fleur, the flower, I think it's in New York. But I make a point of commemorating and buying some of these autos with the players from that era because I was so completely in love with Flower. And that's the other thing too, the fact that he's called the Flower. There's something just so prescient about it. And of course my cat is named Fleury, my female cat is named Fleury, and she's named after Marc-André Fleury. She's named after Theo Fleury, but prominently and mostly she's named after Guy Lafleur. I'm going to try to show you in its entirety what they did for Flower yesterday, note and the standing ovation. And this isn't even their formal recognition of Flower. I know for a fact what they'll probably do is they'll bring all the old school players out to speak about him. They will do some formal ceremony for him. That's just how Montreal handles its business. And again, when people talk about him being a defensive liability or strife with Lemaire, forget about all that stuff. Remember his game on the ice with Lemaire. Don't think about the new defensive system in the 80s and 90s that mucked up the game and Flower's response to it. Flower was plus 446 in his career. That places him 10th or 11th all time. That has to do with Dryden, it has to do with the big 3D, but it has to do with his goal scoring prowess and being on the most winningest team in the history of the game in terms of that, what was it, that 1976 season, where they went 68-12 with 132 points back in the 80 game season. And I just have to say, he was the most recognizable player on the planet at the time. And he probably to this day remains one of the most identifiable icons just because of the no helmet era before mandatory helmets and so on, and how easily, like butter, he cut through teams. Yeah, recognize the Flower, guys, recognize Flower. I'm gonna be full of cars live and direct from a place called Montreal, Quebec.